for that. So now I will talk to my second favorite topic right now today is the Amistad. And here is our finished paper. I just actually printed it. Yeah.
Woo!
So this started actually 2 years ago, and Jackie will remember because Jackie had been talking for a long time about what else we could do inside of our organization, right? Because we executive committee handles the hiring and the firing of our employees, as well as what we were doing outside. She had talked for a long time about racial injustice and institutional racism. And again, to her credit, she used those terms before anybody else wanted to hear about it or wanted to accept it. And so anyway, we were talking. I had taken over as the president. Red Richardson was very tuned in with it, as was Steve Swetsky. And we were, I think, at an August exec meeting 2 years ago. And I had given a call out to one of our members who had been recognized by the Holocaust Commission, which is also housed, kind of connected to the DOE, like the Amistad Commission is. And they were giving out an award to one of our teachers who had done exemplary work with the Holocaust curriculum. And Kim and Jackie will tell you, I spend a time, a part of my meeting, calling out what our members do and giving them credit. And I called it out. And at the same time as I called it out, I said, it's about time that we do this with the Amistad, because there is no such work recognition or work for members who did the Amistad. And the more I had looked into it, I realized that the law had been put into place. Jackie had said it for years, 2002. I didn't know anyone that was teaching the Amistad. I've been in the classroom for well over 35 years, and I didn't know of anybody. And it was statute that we had to do it. So I talked to Gary Melton at the time, and I said, do you know of anything? We had a DA motion, actually, from Melissa Tomlinson to do something with Black Lives Matter a couple years ago. So we did a survey. And do you know how many people we found that actually said that they were doing the Amistad curriculum or doing work with Black history and beyond Black History Month? So let's get past that, right? It's beyond Black History Month. We didn't get anybody. Now, I know that we do have people, right? I know Brenda Brathwaite teaches it. I know Petal Robinson did something with it. I know Gary did something with it. And I know that my guy up in Union County, which I forgot his name, he did a lot on the Holocaust, but he also did the Amistad. But it wasn't widespread. And so I went back to the executive committee and I told them that I wanted to appoint a task force of stakeholders. And we were going to look at the Amistad law, look at the curriculum, and see what else we needed to do, because we educate, and I can't help but keep repeating some quotes from Jackie. We educate over 1 million kids every day in our schools. And what we say, what we do, and how we do it means something. And I felt very strongly that we needed to be the leaders in it, but I also said that I will be reaching out to other state stakeholders. So that was school boards, principal supervisors, the superintendents, the BAs, right? Because they control the finances, and there's some money that needs to be spent to implement this. And the PTA, I'm on a group statewide. So I brought it to their meeting in September, and I really wasn't quite sure about the reception. But I am happy, very happy to tell you that every one of the organizations raised their hand and said that they wanted to be part of the task force. And so we started the task force with them and with us. And I then eventually invited the chairs of our Unity group, that Gary had put together, of which, of course, Kim Scott was one, because she was then had taken over the chair of our Human and Civil Rights for Jackie, when Jackie became executive committee member. And we met a few times. I appointed Brenda Brathwaite as the chair, and we came up with some recommendations. And the recommendations, I think there are about 13 of them, are what are the next steps. And the first step was to say that we have a problem because this isn't being done. Second step is to give due credit to the Amistad Commission at the DOE, who had been fighting through the Christie years, and he was trying to absolutely suppress it. Absolutely, he suppressed it. through the DOE, but they had been trying to get some things done. And I wanted to give them, a boost and tell them that they're not alone and we're going to move forward. One of the meetings that I had after Commissioner Lamont Repollet was appointed as commissioner was to tell him 2 years ago of the leadership that we wanted to provide in getting the workout with the Amistad with our members. And he immediately jumped on it. He had himself taken multiple trips to Guyana, as it turns out, and had quite a bit of knowledge about the slave trade and how it was used and how it flourished, right? Because of the white people in this country. And he said he wanted to join with us. That's how, in fact, we had the DOE join with us. And he said that he would go one step further. And he said to me 2 years ago, Marie, when I look at the QSAC, and we all go through that QSAC accountability regulations every few years, he said, there's nothing in there about the Amistad. And I said, well, Lamont, what do you suggest? And he said, I'd like to make it in there. And I said, I would support that. I said, what I don't want is it to be seen as another add-on with our members. I want our members to see that this is an integral part of every part of the curriculum, not just social studies in Black History Month or Martin Luther King weekend, right? It's got to be an integral part across the curriculum at all areas for all grade levels. And Lamont, and if any of you know him, he is a man of his word. He absolutely got that. And he had that put into place this year and had it approved by a state board of education who has not been that friendly with us. And we all know it. Most of them are Christie holdovers. And hopefully one of these days, the governor is going to appoint the right people on that board. But suffice it to say, Lamont was still able to get that part through. So going back, so then I want to fast forward. Jackie had raised the idea about doing even a trip, right, to go and educate our members about what this was like. And she worked with Ed Richardson, who was the former executive director, and us. And we came up with the idea of what we're calling the Amistad Journey. So that, like the Holocaust, and NJEA, and with much credit to our members, we allocate a considerable amount of money every year to the Holocaust Commission, and it supplements and it pretty much pays for a good number of our members to take the journey of the Holocaust. They go to Germany, they go to Poland, they actually visit the sites where the concentration camps were. It's a wonderful experience. I have not taken the experience. Sean Spiller and his wife went about 2 years ago. I know Steve Beatty and Tamara are on the trip schedule for the next time it goes. And we said we can do that with this trip. And so at the NJEA convention, and many of you remember, in fact, Jackie was on stage because we gave credit to her contributions and her leadership with us. Also, Kim Scott, remember, was on the stage with us. We announced publicly that we were going to fund, NJEA was going to fund the Amistad Journey. And I announced that we had just completed our work back then in the fall with this, as far as the paper was concerned. Brenda did her part on the stage, and that we would have the report written. We had planned to do it between January and February. It did not occur we just didn't get it done. I had the draft. We just didn't get the finished product done. And then the COVID hit and we all shut down. And so it got further delayed. And so I was just able to actually get back to it over this last month. Gary and I worked through it, and much thanks to Patrick Rumaker, who, he does the NJEA review for us. We brought him in and asked him if he would be the editor, and taking all the work that we had compiled and putting it into a cohesive format so that, in fact, we could move forward. And I will tell you, Evelyn, I'll send this to you by tomorrow, that I will hope that you will take this document and share it with all the members here on this committee. So what are the next steps? Well, number one, we want to take a look at the curriculum itself. You know, the Amistad Commission had done a wonderful job, free resources, by the way, through the DOE on, I forget which grade levels right this minute. I think it was like for grades 3 or 4 on up, to do what you could implement and put into your classrooms or into any of our work areas where we had, but it hadn't been updated for quite a while. And like our normal curriculum, we should be doing it about every 5 years. That needed to be done. But again, you know, it was tough for them during the Christie years because they were lucky that he even allowed them to even exist, let alone do anything. So that's one of the recommendations. And we plan to work with them, and I plan to have our practitioners apply and get through the, you know, come through with some updates into that curriculum and expand it. One of our teachers who served on there tomorrow actually she's from Pleasantville. She teaches, now I don't remember if it was preschool or kindergarten, but she actually came in and did a lesson with our group at that level. And it was fabulous. Like we all learned on the task force, but the fact that she showed what you could do at a young level, but still get the idea that the Amistad, we can't teach slavery once we have enslaved people. The story is that we went into countries, we invaded them, and we kidnapped people from their land, from their families. We ripped a culture apart. And we brought them over here. And for 400 years, this country has still not acknowledged what we did. Yet, when I looked at the Holocaust, what has happened in Germany, not only do we have this trip, Germany has it in place in their curriculum. They have owned up. Now, they will differentiate between Nazi Germans and Germans, and they will not own the Nazi Germans. But they have owned the fact that this occurred in their country with their people, and they are determined to have done something about it. And so one of my steps that I undertook was to find out, well, if they've done this, right? Why haven't we, and why can't we do that? And so one of my contacts was to actually the governor, because if you remember, he was the German ambassador under President Obama. And so I contacted his wife and him, and I actually now have some German contacts that we at the, I have Gabe Taglau now working with us as well. Eric Jones working with us, Patrick Roommaker, Steve Beatty's working with us. We're going to make a contact over there to find out at the, I say the state level, but for them it's the country level, what were the steps after World War II? How were you able to get people to acknowledge what had happened, to own it, to take responsibility, to do some retribution, by the way, to the families that had been ripped apart, and then put it into your education system so that it's not thought of as something different that somebody else did. It's what we are all capable of if we are not careful.
I think this is so important, and it's so important at a time where there's so much racial unrest. Yes. And mainly because the focus have been taken off just your points that you're making in terms of how, you know, Blacks have been treated in this country, systematic racism, the impact of the system of you know, massive incarceration, and so much police brutality and voter suppression. We look at a curriculum now that would support and be reflective of a curriculum that is reflective of our children. How, you know, in terms of this, I see the steps that you laid out, but the monitoring of it, the materials that go along with it, how can districts across New Jersey, let's start with New Jersey, how can we invest, you know, a lot more of it in terms of the you know, the books that were written, the materials that are written? And I want to pose that question first to Jackie, and then to yourself. Mm-hmm. What do we have, you know, at stake here?
Okay, I'm gonna speak honestly because I'm too old to remember not honest stuff. So I'm just gonna talk. Um, One of the things about Amistad, and I do attend their public meetings, I think quarterly, either 3 or 4 times a year. I do attend those public meetings with Amistad. My issue with the Amistad Commission is that I understand the legacy, certainly that Marie put out there, but it's been 18 years, you know. And quite frankly, I had conversations with Lamont and Abdul Salim Hassan, his not co, but assistant
One of the assist-
commissioner. Huh?
Yeah, one of the assistant commissioners. Yep.
Right. He was all Lamont was one of my members in East Orange, and Mr. Hassan was a principal and getting ready to be superintendent in East Orange. But we talked about the fact that this had laid dormant for so long. I do agree that now is the time because of the other uprising. This battle has never ever been won, has never taken steps without a cohesiveness of peoples. This is not just a Black person's battle. This is not a colored thing. And now it seems that the time is right. But I'll be honest with you, as far as curriculum go, my ideas, because we talked at some point about me being on the commission. Now he's gone and whatnot, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But as an educator, the first thing I would do would be to pull together my the people in the state that had that vested interest that have been doing this, because there are people in East Orange that have always been doing this, curriculum or not, to pull those minds, and I know there are others, to pull those minds together and establish a curriculum from pre-K through 12 and hopefully 16 as well, because I was just on a call about some of the same thing. I don't know who remembers in this room, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was an outcry that everybody must teach reading. It didn't matter whether you were a physical education teacher, art teacher, whatever you taught, home ec, everybody had to teach reading. That's what I'm hoping comes out of this, because my certification is vocal music, and so, but it should apply if you're an art teacher, a physical teacher, no more home ec anymore, computer teacher, whatever you teach, if that is infused from pre-K all the way through, then we stand a chance of actually making a change, because we would have raised a generation of kids who at least know. You can't make somebody value, but I believe if you start them young, they'll say like, oh yeah, a Black man invented the cell phone. I would wager $1,000 that the average person doesn't know that every that Timbuktu was the first university in the world, and every college and or university is based upon that model. So I think that it's going to come with, to be more direct, that question is bringing together those like-minded people to develop pre-K through 12, hopefully, 4 years, 16 curriculum that can be followed. Right now, everybody's just pulling whatever they can pull from wherever they can pull it. But I think the curriculum would be important, especially if it's now going to be on QSAC, because that curriculum accountability.
Yes. Thank you, Jackie. Marie.
Yeah, 100% in agreement. Jackie, your classroom teachers comes right out. No, it has to start with the practitioners and with that curriculum. And it also has to start with us holding ourselves accountable in our own buildings and holding these districts accountable. Last week, there was a very fast bill that was put together, led by Senator Ruiz, actually from Essex, and as I'm thinking about it, to have the DOE identify book vendors that are doing the correct job with not only showing diversity, right? Because we can go through and pick out the pages where there are people of color. It's more than that. It's including the historical perspective from all of those groups, because we don't have books that do that. We don't. We pretend we do, but we don't. And I am very happy to tell you that when I found it, I asked, were we going to put a position in, and it was brand new. They hadn't even really analyzed it. Long story short, we did support it, but nobody else did on the other groups. They had reservations. There was a concern about this or that. And I went, no, all those other details will get worked out. Let's call it what it is, and let's put it on the DOE to identify books, because the books that we have are a revisionist narrative of history. It's not the truth. It's not the facts. You know, when we were doing NJEA live learning, when we had the TV program over this pandemic led by the Teacher of the Year, it was a fabulous program. But I said, well, I want to make sure, because we were helping to fund it, I wanted to make sure that we had diversity teaching the lessons, but also that we were giving diverse lessons. And one of the people, not our staff, not Kim Hughes, but one of the people that I spoke with, she said, oh yeah, we're doing the Amistad. We're teaching about the Underground Railroad. And I went, the Underground Railroad? I said, that's not the Amistad. I mean, look, it's a part of the story. Don't misunderstand me, but that's not, but because people haven't been trained. You see, we're going to have to, and we said, and you'll see in our document, we're going to have to develop professional development workshops. We're going to have to train our teachers. We're going to have to bring the college people in to say, what are you doing in your colleges? Black history should not be an extra course that you can sign up for. Going back to your example, Jackie, with reading, when I was in college, I was in special ed undergrad program, and I knew I didn't know anything about reading at that time, right? And I thought I should have a course to teach reading. Do you know that it was not required? I could be a certified teacher with special ed kids, and that was probably their number one problem. And I didn't have to. Now, I took the course as an elective course, right? Since then, that reading course has now become part, because other people scream and we got to change. We're going to have to do this with teaching the Amistad and to teach the infusion here in this country. But we are also have to be very aware that politically, and we've got an opportune time, I feel, with the murder of Mr. Floyd and with the other murders that have occurred, to seize this moment, because this country has to embrace the fact that our ancestors, we did this, and there is white privilege, and I'm white. It does exist, and I help, not knowingly or not purposely, but by being white, I am helping keeping institutional racism. That's not an easy thing for me to say, but I have seen it. I've embraced the ownership of it, because we're never going to fix it until we do it. And I bring up the situation, Evelyn, you brought it up earlier about the opportunity that we have from these tragedies. When we're polling people across the country, they're not going to call themselves racist. They're just, because they have a different definition of what racism is, but they are admitting that there's a problem here and that we need to do something, because we have caused this situation, and we cultivate it. We cultivate it because we are benefiting from it. And until we can embrace that, right? We have to, we're gonna have a lot of work to do, but that is one of the ideas. The other idea that in one of these 12 or 13 recommendations is to have the DOE work to do not only the Amistad Journey, and we're gonna fund, again, a sizable portion is what we do with the Holocaust Journey, but to also recognize our educators who are doing exemplary lessons like they're doing with the Holocaust, because the Holocaust has become quite popular to teach, right? But because there are people dedicated, and so they're all in it. And again, I have to say, we can't negate the colleges and the influence that they have with the number of teachers that they're training. We have to have this course as part of, integrated into all of their courses. Like you said, Jackie, it has to be part of music. It has to be part of math. It has to be part of science and phys ed. Of course it does. And we can do that if we have a mind to do it. And I do think that it is going to fall on us, as everything else does, with the educators who are in our schools and on our buses. And I feel that we have a tremendous influence in this state, NJEA members, and it's our moral responsibility to lead this and to demand the change that is going to occur with it.
There's some questions in the chat box. We have one that says, I think the entire thought of the Amistad curriculum being implemented in our school is essential, but I must ask, why is there such a drag or hesitant in getting it into place?
So that's not on our part, right?
Right.
You tell me, you look at your schools, the administrators are not any more versed in this than most of the people that are in our schools. And so step one, that's why I knew, and I was a little surprised actually, but I was so happy to hear when I asked principals and supervisors, school boards, PTA, superintendents, the state level groups came onto this, and we all agreed on these recommendations, and we all agreed that what could each of us do. All of us provide professional development. They all agreed to do that. We agreed to have it. We were actually going to do a whole section on undoing racism, and Jackie's been through that program. I have as well. We were going to do it at the convention. We were going to offer a session for people, and that's an intense program. If any of you here have been through it, but that's what, and we were going to do it at Summer Leadership, by the way, as well. We're not doing it virtually. We're still convening and talking about it, but to try to do that actual training there, I don't think you're going to get the same results. But I bring it up because that ownership, Dawn, has to occur first. And whites, blacks, Hispanics, if we're Americans and we're living in this country and we want to make it better, it's going to take all of us coming together to get it done.
Can I say something about that, please? This is Jackie. In response to Dawn's question again, it comes, the most major block is that it is very hard for someone to consider themselves a racist. It is very hard. And I'm going to go back to what Marie said earlier. And I'm just going to make a little correction, Madam President, to that. Because, like I said, this battle has never advanced without the help of white people.